When I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not an economist, and I think economists don't even know. I know some history, so okay, this is a good phrase, a good slogan, because this one is true. He who doesn't learn history is doomed to repeat it. Okay, so let's go back to history. Okay, back to Rockefeller. Rockefeller was America's first tycoon, oil tycoon. He started refineries and was buying up all these black gold. Texas was big, very cheap oil. But he started on the east side, and that's where his first refinery was. He started by selling kerosene. But he was friends with another robber baron with the J.P. Morgan, who owned a railroad. See, these guys, there ain't many of them even today, okay? But they create cartels and they do alliances with governments and stuff like that. They are corporate Mongols. So J.P. Morgan helped them distribute kerosene all over the United States. He had, wow, but that wasn't enough. He was already rich just with kerosene, but there's so much oil coming gushing out of the ground. He wanted to make more money, so he put scientists to study the black stuff that was gushing from the ground, and he had to do something with this because he wanted to make a lot of money. So eventually, plastics was developed. This I'm using this example not as a savior of a restructuring economy, but it certainly gave it a boost. And you know, our system it's just like it needs energy. It's just like the universe, you know. It's just like the universe. So what happened was is that he wanted to control many things, make a lot of byproducts, and this story has something to do with modern days, what we're living today, actually. Because what happened was is eventually plastics, okay, then petrochemicals, fertilizer, and pesticides, poisons. Then big pharma. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, they actually invented big pharma. Because when the scientists, this was 1910, when the scientists figured out that they could mimic that resource and mimic natural chemicals and synthesize them, then big pharma was born. How did they do this? There was no such thing as drugs. The whole world was apothecaries. And but they wanted to get into the business. You know, apothecary is bad business because you're very honest homeopath. You go into his shop and you have some sort of disease or an ailment, and they know, like from Chinese immigrants, because Chinese helped build J.P. Morgan's railroad. So Chinese immigrants, indigenous Americans, and general knowledge, very old millennial knowledge, they knew what combination of certain herb would help in certain diseases, etc. So it was very well, but it's not good business. It's the production line. Dot 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 dot. Put out the pills. Put out the pills. Put out the pills synthetically. So what Carnegie and him both did is criminal. They created foundations and they did away with over 100 of homeopathic suppliers. Okay, because you got to get one herb from the Himalayas. You got to get another one from China somewhere. Another one from some sort of forest in Canada. It just didn't make. They didn't want to get in the apothecary business, so it was a great business to manufacture drugs. So they changed the science. They created modern medicine, modern drugs, and look where that has gotten us. So they changed the curriculum. They actually changed the curriculums in major universities in the United States and assassinated apothecaries. No university courses on apothecary, and wiped out over 100 locations that sold herbs. So, criminal, okay? But when he did that, it created a new industry, created more employment, created more sick people. But it was great for the economy. Then the Roaring Twenties came. I'm not sure if it was related, but the Roaring Twenties came. And then, boom, the 1929 Great Depression. Crash. Okay? So, then other forces, unimaginable forces, helped organically from bottom up, roots, a root organization. And I'm talking about unimaginable in America back then and even today. The labor unions, which were considered communist, socialist, dirty words, all of them. The socialist, the communist, they all got together in a united front, which I hope we do in this conference here. And those were dirty names. They had been those names, because it's word manipulation, linguistic manipulation, social engineering, programming. It's unimaginable that those groups met with FDR, created a strong front, and FDR was no communist socialist, or he was a capitalist. But he actually listened to them, needed their support, and created the New Deal. Does that sound familiar with what's happening today? So, FDR saved capitalism, okay? Then the 50s and 60s, strong economies. The factories were rolling. But the factories started to decelerate. Corporations have stockholders. Corporations own the factories. There can't be unemployment, and you can't stop a factory. It's like the Charlie Chaplin movies. The gears have to turn. The gears have to turn. The gears have to turn. Capitalism needs energy. Okay? Just like Rockefeller injected energy the same way the universe works and at least boosted. It wasn't a reset, okay? But FDR reset it. He restructured and he saved capitalism, okay? Then the 50s and 60s, there was like General Electric, which is a horrible corporation too. It's a military contractor, and there was, even in this area that I'm here now, had this as an example. It's a perfect example. General Electric refrigerators. you don't know over there, but in developing countries, they had this General Electric refrigerator that was, the steel was so thick on it, and they work until today. Okay, it doesn't break. It weighs about a ton, but it does not break. Okay, so corporations, because sales weren't going up, so production was going down. Corporations like General Electric and all of them, they all got together, and because they do this, like the WEF got together, and they've done this throughout history. So they get together, and they didn't invent, because it was actually invented by General Motors in the 1920s, but they needed to increase sales, increase production, or there was going to be another depression. So they solved the problem by something that was invented by General Motors in the 20s, and that's called planned obsolescence. And we all know what planned obsolescence is. It's a lifespan for each product. So you get residual business. You don't want something to last a lifetime. So they figured out that it was good to create lifespans on, or not engineer excellent products. And we have that today, and with the iPhones and or smartphones or digital television, everything breaks really real fast. It's called planned obsolescence. So, planned obsolescence, the implementation of planned obsolescence, may have saved capitalism again. So, the 70s come around. Petroleum crisis. I remember, like the millenniums today, being worried. I was a teenager, and I knew I had to work myself through college, and I was worried if I was going to have a job after high school, because it was a recession, like it always happens. Every 5-7 years, capitalism goes up and down. I saw my parents, refugee parents, work double shifts in their factories. When I saw that, then I knew it was the economy, and I was just like a teenager. But the Nixon, he decides, they had already sold part of the gold reserves in 2 or 3 other periods when they needed to put energy into the American economy, but there was still gold reserves. They say there still is, but no one really knows. Fort Knox. So Nixon decides, wow, I don't want to be president and my legacy to be another depression or a bad recession. So he sells and gets off the gold reserves. Saves, again, capitalism by selling some of America's gold reserves, or all of it. No one knows. So, but now there's a problem. Now, he's afraid that America could tank because of lack of confidence and faith that they've had since World War II. Because let's go back to World War II. FDR saves capitalism, and World War II starts, and those gears really start rolling. General Motors, GE, all military contractors. And America gets rich and powerful. Why do they get rich and powerful? History repeats itself. The British had the strongest enemy, and they dominated the seas. But after World War II, the only strong navy that was left is the American. So in capitalism, a navy protects the seas, so They, after a few meetings, they imposed that and said, okay, we will protect the flow of goods around the world. We are strong, and we will do that for capitalism. The flow of goods around the world in the seas is the bloodstream of capitalism. A few meetings after, the US dollar becomes the strongest currency in the world and the reference currency in the world. Because till today, energy and might rules. So then we went to the 70s, but the dollar isn't ruling anymore. There's not that much confidence. Okay, so Nixon needs to do something. He's got a brutal war criminal Secretary of State called Henry Kissinger, but he was a genius. So he went and he cut a deal with the Saudis. I don't have time to get into this probably, but if the question and answer, if you want to know how they did that, I can answer that. He cut a deal with the Saudis. The Saudis, after a few meetings, announced that every petroleum deal anywhere around the world would be pegged to the US dollar. So again, Nixon saves, the Saudis save capitalism, okay? Because they had, I'm sure they had Saudi Aramco, petroleum companies, the Texas boys. It's always a small group. Well, then the next, there was the war, okay? And remember Eisenhower saying, the Vietnam War, I think it was called Indochina then. So he had war and he had energy and military might. But the wars, remember Eisenhower said in 1960 that in his departure from the presidency speech, another thing about war manipulation, when Eisenhower won the war or was instrumental in winning the Allied forces after D-Day and after World War II, you know, the army that he commanded was called the Department of War. So Eisenhower, after the war, all of a sudden is called in the UN. The UN is when they created the state of Israel in 1949. The UN made this happen. So all of a sudden, it's not called, we don't want no more war anymore, so we'll call it Department of Defense. What a contradiction. So Nixon could have, because Eisenhower said, we must be careful because something new is resurfacing, and it's corporation wars started for profit, military-industrial complex. But Vietnam was small, little tiny country, and they were having a real hard times, a real hard time in the jungle, and so that wasn't too much of a factor. But wars continued, modern wars. Then 2008 came, and it's already an artificial economy because after that, some Federal Reserve Chief Alan Greenspan, it started for quantitative easing at some point between Nixon and forward, fast forward. So this quantitative easing and printing of money, then we're already at an artificial economy. Then 2008, Obama comes in. And it's like another Great Depression, imminent. But Obama, he is in bed with Wall Street and corporations. We know this about through campaign funding. I mean, they were hand in hand. He wanted to become the first black president. And he became the first black president. But the first black president, first of all, he intensified war. He knew that he needed to do this because the military industrial complex was augmenting, helping the U.S. economy. If he stopped, then there would have been a depression. But he also, because after Eisenhower warned about that, the first Catholic president, JFK, when he tried to stop the Vietnam War and also tried to mess with the Federal Reserve, central bank, what happened to him? He's Obama, I imagine. It was already unbelievable that Obama was not assassinated just for being a black president. That surprised me. And, but Obama knew that he could not, he had to intensify war. And he even got a Nobel Peace Prize for intensifying wars. He knew that if he went against big interest and did the wrong thing, like JFK did with the Federal Reserve and the war machine, that he would be just like JFK, 6 feet under and pushing up daisies. So he was very careful, and but he was part of the system. Okay, 2008. Now we're really artificial. Now it's really an artificial economy since 2008. So now we come to today, to the present moment. And that's where I need to explain, because there's no downplaying. I don't think there's any more saving capitalism artificially. And I don't believe the way that WF wants to do it. So we are living, I don't want to downplay this at all, we are living in extraordinary times. And now, who knows what will work? Who knows what will work? I don't think economists, I don't think a Nobel Prize economist knows how we're going to get out of this mess without tremendous social chaos, unplanned wars, and everything else that I mentioned before.